So you might have clicked on this video because you wanted to see a modern streamer react to the modern ban list, and I am going to do that here, but I find it kind of impossible to reflect on Nadu and Grief being banned in modern today without reflecting on the last 2 months of the modern format. 52 days ago, Frank Carson put out this wonderful, well-written article, as Karsten articles always are, titled Why Nadu Should Be Banned in Modern. And I think maybe at this point we could rename this Why Nadu Should Have Been Banned in Modern 52 days ago. Here he outlines the data that Modern had an incredibly dominant Pro Tour in an environment where other Pro Tour competitors felt that they were very prepped for the matchup. However, it becomes apparent that Nadu basically has no bad matchups. Additionally, Nadu is a tournament logistics nightmare where it makes matches go super duper long. They're very crazy convoluted loops that are boring to play against, and boring to watch. And similar cards like Second Sunrise and Sensei's Divining Top, Card Clan Ironworks, have been banned for similar reasons because they just make paper tournament magic take too dang long. Here, Carson argued that a timely Nadu ban 52 days ago could possibly save the upcoming modern RCQ season that we now find ourselves in. Carson argued that banning Nadu would, one, not incentivize players to spend hundreds of dollars on a paper modern deck that is very likely to get banned in a few weeks. Two, have players be able to play test for this RCQ season in a Magic Online environment, in a paper playtesting environment that is free of this card that is very likely to get banned in a few weeks. And in my mind, most importantly, make the metagame more fun and interesting, and to salvage some of the hype for Modern Horizons 3. Modern Horizons 3 is perhaps Magic's most anticipated set of all time. I think you can make a very good argument that it was. And this set had a huge amount of eyes, either from players who were considering getting into Modern for the first time or considering returning to the format after an extended break. And an incredible amount of that excitement and that hype that the rest of the set, every non-Nadu card in the set had inspired, died because of Wizards' decision to not proactively ban this card. And in today's August 26 BNR announcement, they addressed this problem that they had today's August 26 BNR announcement, which is very likely going to have a modern ban be stuck in the middle a few weeks into modern RCQ season. Addressing this, I'll summarize. They have now adjusted the schedule to try to correspond with the paper RCQ seasons, and this does conversely mean that there are going to be less BNR announcements. But structuring your ban announcements like this only solves half the problem. Yes, aligning your ban announcements with regional championships means you won't run into the problem of having to ban a card in the middle of RC season, but this doesn't solve the problem of formats where a broken card is ruining tournament experiences. When Nadu being legal caused huge player hemorrhages, lower tournament attendance, and people just selling out of Modern. I know, because they're coming into my chat every day saying that they don't really want to play Modern anymore because of Nadu. And so from my perspective, I just think that these scheduled BNR announcement dates are significantly worse than the Wizards' format management team, whatever you call them, just banning cards when they need to be banned. This is something that they have done in the past, and they've kind of flip-flopped on this scheduled BNR announcements and the sort of as-needed ban structure. And in my experience, from my perspective, the as-needed bans works so much better. With the as-needed ban schedule, you can just ban a problematic card before RCQ season starts in the same way that we could have banned Nadu 52 days ago if we didn't have the scheduled ban announcement, solving the same problem that this restructuring is trying to solve. Additionally, only one paper format at any given time is the RCQ format, which means that if it's standard season, Pioneer players, Legacy players, Modern players, I guess Legacy players will always have this perspective, shout out Legacy players, they would much prefer, I think, a more proactive management to their ban list, because these players during the offseason are not playing their formats to prep for paper tournaments. They're playing them because the formats are fun, and they want them to be fun. And at least in the context of Modern, a fun format would look like a Nadu Banned 52 days ago. A fun Legacy format might have looked like Grief Banned 90 days ago. So why isn't this happening? Now, I think the argument for why Wizards doesn't structure things like they used to with these as needed bannings is because they want players to feel secure. They want players to feel like they can know when a big change is going to happen. But I think that this ban and restricted announcement season, this announcement season, has kind of shown the opposite in like a weird psychological way, where instead of players feeling like secure that Wizards is going to clean things up in a couple months, they feel unhappy because gameplay is not that fun, but they also feel pressure for extra things to happen too. And that pressure comes from the fact that if Wizards doesn't perfectly fix a format with a scheduled BNR announcement, the next chance they have to fix it is months and months away. I think the next scheduled BNR they've said is now in December. And that means that if the One Ring or Ruby Storm or Ugin's Labyrinth decks or whatever ends up being super duper prominent, dominant, and modern, and things are unfun, then we have months before Wizards is going to do anything about it. And I don't think that there's been a more clear example of players being stressed and psychologically unhappy because if Wizards did not fix the format, the modern format, with today's BNR announcement, it's just not going to get fixed for a long time. And there's this angst and this existential dread that I see every single day in my Twitch chat. And this angst, this dread, this frustration that modern players and myself are feeling about this ban structure that we have has become exacerbated by the wild inconsistencies in this article about Wizards' thought process in banning Grief, but not deciding to ban the One Ring. For some time now, Grief has been maligned as one of the least fun parts of competitive Modern events. Starting the game down 2 or 3 cards from the various 1-mana ways it can be returned is quite brutal. Having to mulligan is already painful, but being double griefed directly afterwards just exacerbates an already unfun experience. Even outside of mulligans, having a turn 1 answer to a 3 or 4 power menace creature after an opponent has taken away your best cards is just asking too much. Now, these things I do agree with. Getting Grief scammed is pretty unfun. However, if we look at this next paragraph, while Grief is not currently seeing as much play as it has in the past, it is still a format staple used by several decks. Mono Black Necrodominance, Esper Goria's Vengeance, Living End, Rakdos Midrange, and a handful of other decks are still using 1-mana cards to abuse Grief's Manaless Evoke interaction. In the interest of making the format more fun, we are banning Grief today. And what shocks me about this decision to ban Grief today is not what's said in these 2 paragraphs, it's what's unsaid. Grief Scam has been a thing in Modern for 3 years now. A year ago, Rakdos Scam with Grief and Fury was the most dominant deck in the Modern format for an extended period of time, dominated Pro Tour Barcelona, and I would say was significantly more unfun to play against in that era. In fact, when they decided to ban Fury instead of Grief, I also felt at the time that this was the incorrect ban. However, if I locate Rakdos Midrange on NTG Goldfish, which is not a perfect metagame representation, but if I click on it, this says 0.9% of the Modern metagame share. This top list here has no Grief in the deck. I click on this list here, and this is a Hollow One deck list that is also not playing Grief and is also not Rakdos Midrange. Here we have a 2/2 Energy series list here that is it's not even Rakdos. It's Mono Black Necro with 1 Rakdos Theater in their mana base and 3 Rakdos Charms in the sideboard. Like, Rakdos Midrange is not a deck that's in the Modern metagame, and listing it in this Modern ban article is kind of ridiculous, honestly. The other decks mentioned, Goria's Vengeance, Living In, Mono Black Midrange, make up together about 8% of the Modern metagame. And kind of simply put, Grief is not a very dominant card in Modern at the moment. I think that you could maybe say that before Lurrus was banned, Grief was less represented in its Grief's lifespan. But right now, Grief has been feeling like nearly an all-time low. It is, when I think about Modern, I think about decks that I'm trying to beat, cards I'm trying to beat, things I'm trying to metagame against. Grief has been very low on my list of things I'm thinking about. And while I do agree that getting Grief scammed is very unfun, I'm going to shed no tears for Grief. I'm not going to miss that card at all. I think their philosophy for banning it is incredibly inconsistent with keeping the One Ring legal. They say in this article, we certainly considered a few other cards to take action against in this announcement, namely the One Ring. While present in several decks, there is no clear One Ring deck terrorizing Modern. Being a unique combination of self-protection and card advantage, it is a strong card that helps prop up several varied strategies. Ultimately, we decided to not act against the One Ring. The possible problems it may be causing for Modern just aren't as clear as Nadu or Grief. Once we see how the format evolves after this change, we will continue to observe and evaluate the health of Modern and see which future actions are necessary. And what really confuses me about this statement here is it says, the possible problems it may be causing for Modern just aren't as clear as Nadu or Grief. But they say in these statements here, their conversation for Grief being banned is not that it's causing problems because it's too dominant. It's causing problems because it's unfun. And in my experience, talking to Modern players every single day for a full-time job, Modern players are way more upset about playing against the Ring than playing against Grief. And what's silly is I personally don't even think the Ring should be banned in Modern right now. I do think it's a card that can be on the watch list, but I think there's a lot of counterplay to it, and I'm interested to see what it does in the metagame post Nadu. But I have a big problem with Wizards having these two hyper-contradictory ban philosophies. Banning Grief not because it's too dominant, but because it's unfun, but leaving the One Ring legal. And fun is a very subjective thing. I personally don't feel a huge difference in fun with against the Ring, with against Grief. But I think if you polled the Modern player base, the majority of Modern players would say that the One Ring is sucking more fun from their games than Grief has been since Modern Horizons 3. And the main point I'm trying to make with this video, my thesis statement, if you will, is that these scheduled BNR announcements do not work if you're going to be super inconsistent with your ban philosophy. The idea of giving players structure by knowing that a BNR is going to happen on these days does not help players if they are unsure if Wizards is going to ban things because players feel like they're unfun, or if they're going to ban things just on tournament win percentage. It is wildly inconsistent and feels like it flip-flops all the time. And I am not someone who only thinks you should ever ban cards because of their tournament win percentage, because of their metagame share. I do think fun needs to play a factor into your card game. Otherwise, we'd all be playing chess if we didn't care about fun. But I think there's an extreme amount of nuance that comes into those decisions, and that nuance, I think, is largely lost with these scheduled BNR announcements. In fact, it's my impression that the team at Wizards felt pressure to do more than just ban Nadu because this was a very anticipated ban announcement. People anticipated Nadu being banned. However, they have months before the next scheduled BNR, which means that if Nadu being banned doesn't solve Modern, we have another lame duck format for 3 to 4 months. I can't remember exactly when in December this announcement is coming. But there's a huge amount of pressure to ban something else or unban something else so things stay interesting during this time, which is the whole problem. Like, it's my impression that if they didn't have these scheduled BNRs, Grief would still be legal, just because it really seems like they feel pressure to just do something else, which leads to these inconsistent decisions. And there are a lot of things to criticize Wizards for. They make a lot of mistakes. But one thing Wizards is surprisingly good at is admitting mistakes and talking even about how those mistakes came to be. Also today, Michael Majors put out an article talking about how Nadu Winged Wisdom was designed and admitting quite bluntly it was a design mistake and talking even about how this mistake came to be. I would recommend reading the full article, but I can summarize for you. Kind of starts off saying Nadu was just a design mistake, and they talk about how the process of getting there. Nadu used to be the same casting cost 3/4 flyer, but it said you may cast permanent spells as though they had flash, and whenever a permanent you control becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land, put it onto the battlefield, otherwise put it into your hand. Honestly, I would have loved to see this card in Modern. I think it would have been awesome. Unfortunately, after a series of last-minute checks by various groups, there was some feedback that the flash granting ability for Nadu would have been problematic for Commander play. Now, I don't play a lot of Commander these days, so I'm not going to comment on if that would be the case or not. However, I do think it's kind of funny because current edition Nadu also seems like it would be really freaking good in Commander. But because of this impression Michael had, he ended up reworking the card the last minute with the intention of Nadu being a card that was mostly designed for Commander and less so designed for Modern. Now, I'm not a delusional Modern player. I know that Commander is the most popular format in Magic by a lot. I know that it's very important for Wizards to design cards for Commander. But I also think it is ridiculous that we have Modern Horizons 3 Commander-only cards. There are Commander-only cards in the Modern Horizons set. I think it's ridiculous that we have that product, but a card like Nadu can be explicitly designed only for Commander, or primarily for Commander, and is in the regular Modern set when there are cards like Pyrogoyf and the Barrogoyf, which I think would have been awesome Modern cards. And I think there is a huge disconnect there, and that really, really needs to be addressed. And then in this What We Learned section, Michael goes over what we can learn from this process and what went wrong. He says at one level, he wants to make sure that all relevant groups have time to impact change in a time window that makes sense for the project. Now, I actually consulted on Lord of the Rings. I consulted on Assassin's Creed in the same capacity. I said no to consulting on Modern Horizons 3 because they wanted me to come to Seattle for 6 weeks, which just really wasn't an option. It would have impacted my stream schedule too much. But there was a very similar event during my consulting for Lord of the Rings when I saw the One Ring. It was a 5-mana artifact, and it was so unmemorable. It basically had no effect on the game. It didn't draw cards. It might have been an equipment, but it was completely forgettable, and I felt that it was a card that was not going to impact any format, even Commander, outside of the most casual decks. And they also took the ring and changed it last minute because it didn't have a target audience. In the same way that Nadu, in this older design, they felt like didn't have a good target audience. They changed the ring to try to give it a target audience too. And this was this has happened twice now. And I really sincerely hope that they do learn from this mistake and that it doesn't happen again. That if they're going to change a card last minute, either a lot of eyes go on it or they play it very, very safe. And they really do not try to take risks with these cards. And I do think today can be a really important learning lesson for Wizards. One, I would really encourage them to get rid of the scheduled BNRs and go back to the as-needed bans. I think labeling them as-needed bans instead of emergency bans might be good for optics, but that's really not my field. And I also think these last-minute card changes should either see, again, a lot of eyes or just be played very safe. And I do think Wizards, as game designers, have come a long way from the War of the Spark to Kaldheim era, where nearly every set has like 2+, sometimes like up 5, 6 incredibly bad design mistakes. Design mistakes do still happen. The One Ring, Up the Beanstalk, Nadu, they do still happen, but they happen at a much smaller frequency than in the 2019 to 2021 era. And I have a lot of confidence in the design team going forward. But that being said, I would really love for today to be a learning lesson, and I would love to see a more consistent curated ban list for all formats going forward. I do think that with these bans, the literal bans of Nadu and Grief, I think that things in Modern, gameplay-wise, can be very good going forward. I hope that they'll be good going forward. But I would feel a lot more confident if they weren't good, if things were bad, if the ring was too dominant, that I wouldn't have to wait 3 or 4 months for Wizards to do anything about it. But we'll see. I got some sweet brews in the pipeline, and I am cautiously optimistic going forward. One more thing, too, is there is pretty likely some kind of invisible hand, executives, whatever, that don't want to ban a card like the One Ring, or you could say maybe some other cards in the past, because they're expensive, because they're iconic, because they're Universe Beyond. I don't know about any of this stuff. I really try to stay away from the finance side of the Magic community. I don't care about it. I just care about game pieces, gameplay, deck building. That's what I care about. All the financial stuff is noise. That absolutely could be the case on their banlist philosophy too. I think if that is the case, it is also still very contradictory. And I just feel like personally, there was nothing said about it in this article, and that's not really my world exactly. So I just felt not super qualified to comment on how the One Ring's price and how iconic it is might play a factor into their decision to not ban it. And those are all my thoughts. A lot of thoughts. I did a lot of this ranting on stream today, so I wanted to kind of compress it into as short a video as possible, although I think this video ended up being kind of long. And again, I'm critical because I care. I really love Modern. Playing Modern is my favorite thing to do in the world. I love Magic, and I think that Modern has the potential to be something really big and really special. And what's frustrating to me about today is it feels like we're close to getting there, but if we got rid of these scheduled BNRs, I think things would be a lot better. And if we had a more consistent management, things would be better. But I am optimistic going forward. Hopefully Wizards learns from this decision. And I'll see y'all next time. Thank you. Love you. Bye.